Was also part of the camp. The prisoners called it the plantation. This camp was a labor camp. Everyone who came here had to work. All of the prisoners were assigned work details and then sent there. And this one, well, what does plantation sound like, was one of the worst ones. Officially, this part was called herb gardens, Kräutergärten. This is where the prisoners grew medicinal herbs, all kinds of plants, to then sell them, and of course to also sell them to companies that actually made meds out of them. Then we do have this small part, part B. That's the crematorium area. Today it is accessible from the prisoners' camp. Back when this was an actual camp, it was not. It was only accessible through this big part. This big part is the SS camp. Remember the green fence that I showed you on the bus? You've seen those houses, those white houses. You will see them on the way back as well. Dachau was the first concentration camp that was built, and it was built right at the beginning in April 33. Does anyone know when Hitler was voted into power? Also 33, March 33. Not even a month after Hitler took over government. And he was actually voted into power, so all was legal. The Nazis opened up the first concentration camp. And if you think about that, who might the first prisoners have been? Yes, political opponents. Political opponents they had to get rid of, so people from parties like the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, trade unionists, everyone that they did not want in their new government and that they had to get rid of. So this was, in the beginnings, the camp of political prisoners. Then, a couple of months later, because first it was run by Bavarian police, it was like a regular prison. Then, this guy, and you might have already seen him and know his name even, Heinrich Himmler, handed it over to the SS. Does anyone know what SS stands for? Schutzstaffel. Protective squad. They started out as more or less Hitler's bodyguards. Later they evolved into a paramilitary police that was more powerful than the actual police. So of course he gave this camp to the SS and they established their we call it the School of Dachau today, because as this was the first concentration camp, it was an example for all the others. Not only for how you treat prisoners, how you make them work, how you work them to death, how you punish them and so on, but also, that's why we have the SS camp here, how you indoctrinate young men into believing those people are actually worth nothing. How to literally brainwash them into believing the Nazi ideology and following orders without asking questions. That all happened here, so this camp was an example for everything else. And of course you've seen the fence. So the fence still surrounds the whole camp, and we will do two things today. We will, one, follow what the memorial site came up with for visitors, the path of the prisoner. So everything we will see is viewed from the perspective of the prisoners. That's why we, for example, don't climb watchtowers, because that would be the perspective of the perpetrators of the SS. We don't do that. It's all perspective of the prisoners. And we actually already, walked in their footsteps. We came here from Dachau Bahnhof, like most of them as well. So we already did that, and then we will follow them around. around, but what I want to show you as well is how the memorial site and this whole area changed during time, and how our current views still change what we see and how we perceive it. So after the war, this whole area was handed over to the Bavarian state. It is now a camp for the Bavarian riot police. Every policeman in Bavaria is trained in here, and you see how that might be kind of problematic, right? Jour meaning day, and it's also a military term meaning day shift. So this was where, well, the day shift was. The watchtower on top tells you that it was one of the 7 watchtowers, and this is where the camp commander had his office, where part of the secret police had their offices, more interrogation rooms, where the guy assigning the work details had his office, and of course this is the entrance to the actual prisoners' camp. And maybe you've seen what's written on the gate. You've probably heard those very famous words. Arbeit macht frei. Does anyone know what that translates to? Work sets you free. Can you think of a reason why the Nazis would have written that onto the gate?
So they can continue to work. Yeah.
Yes, but...
So they can continue to work to be free.
Yeah.
Thinking they're going to be free.
Yeah. That was actually the one thing that they did not really mean. That was the part, that was the hope they gave the prisoners, but it was mockery. It was mockery because, of course, no matter how hard you worked, you were not released. That was complete mockery. And many of those things were 2 things, mockery and propaganda. Because those words were not actually meant for the prisoners. Those were meant for visitors. And yes, there were visitors to the concentration camps, not only high-ranking party officials of the NSDAP, the Nazi party, no, journalists, politicians from other countries. There's literally a newspaper article from the Manchester Times from the year 1934 of a visit in this concentration camp. People knew about it. It was not kept that secret, at least not those camps, because there is a difference between labor camps like Dachau and extermination camps like Auschwitz. Those were kept secret. Not everything in here was published. Some parts were also very, very secret. But overall, those camps were established as labor re-education camps. So of course there were visitors, because they needed to see what kind of people were in there. And if you come to a labor re-education camp and read "Work sets you free" on the front door, what do you think about the people inside?
They did not work.
Yeah, they are lazy. They deserve to be here. They have to be re-educated. They are beneath us. They are pests to society, as the Nazis called them. So that was not meant for the prisoners, only as mockery. Well, there were more than 200,000 prisoners here, of which New numbers, 43,000 died. Most of them were literally worked to death. Some of them starved, some of them were medically experimented on, some of them died of typhus or tuberculosis, but we will come to that later. Anyone who explored Munich, you might have seen him as a huge graffiti south of the central station. This guy is one of the 40 assassins that tried to kill Hitler. He did not succeed, sadly. He was a watchmaker, and his idea was to bomb it. So he started working in a mine to acquire enough dynamite to build a time bomb. He built a time bomb, and then he started working in the Bürgerbräu, a big YIGO, where Hitler had a speech every year on the 9th of November. And well, he worked there after the place closed down. He hid somewhere, and then at night he dug a hole in the column right next to the podium. Placed the bomb there, covered it up again, and then just wait. Oh well, he did not actually wait. He tried to flee to Switzerland. And his plan did work, almost, because he forgot to account for the weather. So on the day of the speech, on the 9th of November, the weather was very bad, and Hitler could not fly back to Berlin as he had planned. He had to take the train, which left 13 minutes early. So those 13 minutes were not enough for Georg Elser to kill Hitler. He did kill a lot of high-ranking Nazis, but when the bomb exploded, Hitler was already on his way to the central station and survived. But he didn't know. So he had a suitcase with all of his plans and evidence that he was the one who killed Hitler. And of course he got caught and put into the concentration camp, into solitary confinement here in the bunker. And he survived for a couple of years. He was just killed at more or less the end of the war, when the Nazis noticed that no, they would not win, and there would be no show trial. So that's when they started killing off the important prisoners here. In the back there was also one part for priests. They were separate because those prisoners were in solitary confinement. They were tortured a bit. Some of them had better conditions than the prisoners in the actual camp. Some of them worse. The priests were the only ones who were allowed to be in contact with each other. They even had mass and so on in there. With the crematorium area and the baths, this place is one of the 3 places where prisoners suffered the most. We are standing in the courtyard. One half of it was the execution yard. The other side was used for torture, especially for pole hanging, which you will see as pictures in the first room. So if you don't want to see drawings of prisoners, don't go into the first room. Your wrists were bound behind your back, then you were hoisted up, and your shoulders dislocated, and so on and so on. So that was pole hanging. Later it was moved into the maintenance building, but this is the place where prisoners suffered the most. Also because solitary confinement is torture. Then sometimes they were kept in the complete dark for weeks, for months on end, because the Nazis could block out light completely. Every single cell had a toilet, had a heating unit, had a window, and everything was completely controlled from the outside. So if the SS decided no light for you, no light for you. If they decided no working toilet for you, no toilet for you. If they decided that in the wintertime no heat for you, you would freeze. If they decided that in the summertime we will fry you, they turned up the heat completely. So everything was controlled from the outside, and then they were also the standing cells. 70 by 70 centimeters, brick walls on all sides, like a closet made out of bricks, not even tall enough for a person to stand in, so you have to crouch in there like this, sometimes for weeks. So this is a place of immense suffering. YIGO, German cemetery. Why? Because of course once the bodies were burned, the Nazis didn't care anymore. The SS dug out trenches or just dumped the ashes anywhere, so we are literally walking on graves. First, up until the 40s, there was no there, but then in the 40s, their capacities were not enough, so the SS built this small crematorium over here. Once this was no longer enough, they built this whole building. It's called Barrack X. YX. Secret. This was the most secret part of the whole concentration camp. So not even high-ranking Nazi party officials were allowed to visit this part. This was super off limits. So Barrack X. What do we have in there? At the end, or at the beginning, if you want to go inside later, we do have gas chambers that were for disinfection. That's where they disinfected the clothing from Auschwitz. Then we do have two actual gas chambers, or one. You can see those holes in the wall over there. Look, that's where the cyclone B gas would be thrown in, and that's it. They were also fitted like showers with shower heads and so on, but no gas came out. Just thrown in there, and that's it. Then we do have the ovens. They were used until the SS ran out of fuel in the winter of 44-45. That's when, you remember from the film The Heaps of Bodies in front of this building, that's when they couldn't burn bodies anymore. We do not have evidence that people were killed in this gas chamber more than once. We know that it was working, so they must have tried it, but there is no clear evidence. We have one witness account, and the guy changed the numbers a couple of times, so we do not know how many people were killed in there. The numbers range from 4 to 16. So this was never used to systematically kill people. They probably never got to that point. So might have used, and the only evidence that we have that it was functioning is in a letter to the SS officials between the camp commander and the SS, and you have to read between the lines because it's more or less, of course, as the gas chamber is functioning, it is allowed to be used for its intended purpose, and that's it. So no one actually say please kill people in there. So yeah. This is also where the first museum was. From the beginnings, we had tiny small museum. It was not all a memorial site. There was one room in the Barrack X that was a museum, only one, because people didn't want to know. Remember what I told you earlier, up until the 60s, people wanted to forget. They didn't want to know. And up until the 90s, public was still not sure if there's even a need for memorial sites like this. So up until the 90s, up until the second new concept of the memorial site, people were arguing if they should even do that. So what I wanted to tell you earlier, or continue now, was that on a societal level, yes, we talk about it. On a personal level, people still don't want to. Many people died, so they can't anymore, but of course. And I'm the best example. I'm half German, half Polish. Of course, my two grandfathers on my Polish side were in concentration camps. Both of them in Dachau, one of them also in Auschwitz. Did they want to talk about it? No. One of my grandfathers had the number tattooed from Auschwitz, and he promised my mom to tell her the story, He never did. On the other side, my German family, all of the men in the generation of my grandfather, they were all parts of the SS. They were super young when they joined. They were totally brainwashed, but they were still adults. They had to know what they were doing. And only one of them, one of my great-grand-uncles, actually admitted to anything when my parents married. And my dad took my mom to visit them when he was already in hospital dying. And he sent out everyone except for my mom, and then apologized to her for what the Germans did to the Poles during the war. And he forbade her to ever tell anyone else. She told me and my brother, but no one of our family knows. And he did show her the SS tattoo. So you have that in every family. Wherever you look, we all have that past. But people still don't want to talk about it. They want to hide it, they want to forget it. And I do get it because it's not nice to talk about it. But I think it's also important that people know. Around us, This is the International Monument. It was built by Nandoglit in the 60s. And behind me, that part, what do you see? Yes. That part is literally called Bodies in Barbed Wire. So that's what you see. And maybe you've noticed that it's come down. This is the lowest point in the whole memorial area. This is to symbolize absolute rock bottom for all of the prisoners. That's the lowest point. There's only one way. Only ways up. It doesn't get lower than here. So all of this is a symbol for the prisoners. All of the triangles and the stars and the colors and the bars. And then we have something interesting. Empty one. Why?
To show that anybody could be persecuted, maybe?
Anybody who didn't fit the other
Yeah.
category? Nope. Look at the colors.
How they
missing?
make green,
Green, the black
the
ones,
black.
and pink. This is one of my favorite parts of the memorial site because it does show so much how our current views still shape history and how we perceive it and how we tell all of those stories. Nandoglit built this in the 60s. Back then, those three groups were not considered victims. They were not considered victims, and some of them were liberated from a concentration camp just to be put into regular jail. We now, of course, know they were all victims without question, but back then they were not considered victims of the system and of the Nazis. Does anyone know, or can anyone guess, when homosexuals were first considered victims? Because they were the first of those three. 1959. That's also when homosexuality became officially legal in Germany. Scaringly current. Of course, we did have a pink triangle in the memorial site. It was first kept in the Protestant church and it's now in the room of remembrance, the last room of the museum, but it was not here. And Nandoglit, of course, knew that those people were victims, so he did plan those empty spaces so we visitors could come here and imagine them. What do you think? When were green and black, three criminals and asocials considered victims? It was 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
3 years ago. So even if we think we are super progressive, we talk about everything, it's super clear. No, it's not. It's so not. And of course, there's a discussion in the memorial site about what to do with this. Should we now add the colors? Should we put them on the other side? Should we put them somewhere next to it? But if we put them into those empty spaces, wouldn't we hide that current history, that current past, how our views changed? If you have a good idea, please tell them. They will, thank you. But yes, things that 3 years ago were crystal clear are so not clear today. And what we think is correct today can be super wrong tomorrow. So we should always, reflect.
Hey, Steph,
Yes.
if we weren't here with you and we had one of those audio guides,
Yeah.
would you hear about this?
No.
Okay.
That's one of the things that they currently discuss as well, because to everyone is clear, if you had an audio guide and were not on my tour, if you would have heard about that, and it's not in the audio guide. And they are thinking about putting a plaque somewhere here so people can at least read about it and know why those empty spots are empty. You can read it in one of the books about Dachau. So yeah, you'd have to buy a book first, but it's not in the audio guide. And of course, this has a second layer. We do have all of those colors on a chain. Any ideas? Something positive.
Join together.
Yes, join together, solidarity. The only way to survive a concentration camp was solidarity.
You have to find friends as fast as possible. You have to stick together. You have to help each other. And this chain is to symbolize that. And we still have to stick together. And I do have one last quote for you. Find it by this guy. His name is Martin Niemöller, and he was a Protestant priest. And in the beginnings, he was a big fan of Hitler. He thought that he actually did good things. He actually thought that he would bring order to Germany, until he noticed that no, he wouldn't. He joined the opposition and was imprisoned in Dachau as well. And later, because he survived, he once said in an interview, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So even after change of mind, after liberation, or because of that, he knew that the only thing that would save humans, and in the end we're all humans, is solidarity. We have to stick up for each other, we have to help each other, because that's the only way to survive anything, even things like concentration camps. And also to make words that are written on this wall true, and keep them true never again. Because we're the only ones who can prevent stuff like that from happening.